Hi, welcome everyone to the Amplify Speakers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sun, where we uncover the real stories and lessons behind extraordinary leaders and changemakers. Today's guest has lived a career most people only see on TV or the movies. Pamela Barnum is a former undercover police officer and a federal prosecuting attorney turned keynote speaker and trust strategist. She now helps leaders and organizations build trust, read people more effectively, and communicate with authenticity in high stakes environments. Pamela is also the co-host of the TV series Building Bad, where she exposes scams and reveals the psychology behind deception, giving viewers tools to protect themselves in an increasingly complex world. Her insights come from real-world experience, where trust, influence, and human behavior can determine everything. Pamela, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. I've been looking forward to this all week. Your career is definitely not the typical one outside of, once again, what we see on TV, that I'm sure is not even close to what it really is. So I would like to dive in. Let's start off with just going undercover. First of all, not a lot of female do go undercover, and I'd like to hear from your perspective. What was that like?
It was phenomenal. I loved it. I don't know if I would do it now at this point in my life, but back, when I was first starting out, it was an incredible career. And for sure, women are not as drawn to that career. And even today, I spoke to an audience of over 200 undercover police officers in Wisconsin, and amazing people, great. And out of the 204 were women, and out of those 4 women, 2 did some undercover work. But not a lot of people do deep undercover where they live for, 10, 12 months at a time in different communities and integrate at street level and work their way up. And I'm grateful that I had that opportunity, and I learned so much. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but I'm not sure I'd go back in time and do it again at this point in my life.
I understand that. What, what were some of the points where you go, this was way scarier than I thought it would be, or what would keep you from going back to it now?
Well, now I'm a mom, so that's really what took me out of that career, because living for 10, 12 months away from home, and it's a tough gig to sell to the other moms at the side of the soccer pitch or the hockey game that you are buying illicit drugs and kilos and dealing with bikers and drug dealers and gang members. Not a lot of connection there. So that's when I switched over, finished my law degree, and hit the courtrooms.
So was that the inspiration to go into law? Was it starting a family?
It was, I met my husband during an undercover drug operation. We had never met before. We're assigned to be partners and pretend we're married, which is really strange, because you have to live with this person you've never met before, and you're going out there and doing a very high risk job that's late nights, all the things. Anyway, long story short, we fast forward, we started a real relationship, which is kind of funny because we had to keep it a secret from the police officers because we couldn't have a romantic relationship, but the drug dealers all knew we had a romantic relationship. So it was really, it was interesting, and it's fun. We call it our government prearranged marriage. But after we left that project, my husband went into the canine unit. I stayed in drugs, and then when we decided to start a family, we both were, and I had been almost 10 years at this point in drugs, so it was a great time to just move on and transition, and then take that experience from working as first a uniformed police officer, then an undercover police officer, and take those skills and bring them with me as a prosecutor. And really a lot translates between those two careers. So, and I had different experiences, and I loved being a lawyer as well. So I've been very fortunate.
Does your husband still work in law enforcement?
No, he retired as well, and now he does all the behind the scenes things for me when I'm speaking. So he's amazing because he's so great with people, and he just makes sure that everything runs smoothly. So we still get to work together, just in a different way now.
I love that. Well, who would have thought that one moment you'd end up finding the person you love and still working together in some
Yeah,
capacity? I mean,
yeah,
honestly, when you're telling that story, that sounds like a scene out of a TV show or movie.
yeah. And I have lots of versions of that story. I have the PG corporate friendly story, and then there's the having a glass of wine with friends kind of story. That there's different layers of the details you're gonna get.
I bet. See, once again, made even better for TV movie, maybe down
Yeah.
the road. You know, what before we get into, I think, the law, I just want to take one more question. Was there ever a time where I'm sure there's lots of high stakes moments? I guess I'd like to know what was one of the most high stakes moments that you're able to talk about that you're
Oh,
in?
well, I think one that really sticks out of my mind that taught me a lot of lessons because I screwed up royally in this particular case. I'd been in the drug world for a little while. We were coming to the end of this 10-month long project, and I had worked with this one particular dealer on a few deals, and he had promised this really big deal, which was going to be, the highlight of this particular project. And I had grown to trust more or less this person. He was always pretty reliable. Anyway, jump forward. We get this deal planned out for $250,000 in dope, and I'm going to meet him, and we're going to go and meet my buyer, who, of course, another undercover drug officer, and then I'm going to give a signal, and everybody's going to get taken down at the same time. And in my mind, I'm going to fly off into the sunset, and I had two more rips. We call them rips, where we rip off the drug dealers later that day at the end of this project. But things started to spiral and go wrong because I wasn't paying attention to the nuances and the shifts that were happening in the moment because I was so focused on this end goal that I wasn't paying attention to things that when I play it back seemed obvious. It's like when you're watching a scary movie and you're yelling, "Don't go in the basement," to the character on the screen, and they just go in anyway. You're thinking, how do they not see that? That was me. I ended up jumping out of a moving car on the highway, and to get out of this scenario, it was when I play it back, I can now see all of the things. So that's one of the things I like to talk about when I am speaking, depending on which keynote or which conversation I'm going to have with clients. But I draw a lot from that because so often we are in high stakes scenarios, and business is high stakes every day. You have people depending on you, customers, employees, all of the things, or different institutions. I've spoken for the Fed and for the federal government in the United States and military. There's lots of different things that can be happening in the moment that you're used to because that's your world. But you're going to miss things when we slip into that habitual way of seeing the world, or how we just show up in a way that is consistent, but we're not really in the moment. So one of the things I like to talk about is how do we slow that down? And when we are in those high risk situations, or when change is happening, chaos all around us, we wake up, the world is different, all the things that are happening, what are some strategies that we can put into place so that we can be that person looking and saying, okay, we're not going to make this move. I'm reading you much better. We're going to transition here, or I'm going to give you a little bit more. I'm going to influence down this direction and go from there. So that's one case. I tell it with a little more detail, but I know that we don't want to keep everybody on the podcast all day, but that's one. There were lots where I'm locked in a drug house. I'm all the things that happen that you have to use your instincts and also be able to influence people to get them to do the things that you're looking for them to do while maintaining your safety and the safety of the mission and the goals and the people around you. There's a lot of moving pieces, but we're also capable of doing that if we have high degree of tactics. So I call it when self-awareness meets situational awareness. And then how do you work that?
That is some fantastic advice. going back to that story and on the same, I guess, theory of situational awareness, a lot of time's passed since then. And if you would go back and reflect on it, do you think that, you said it's easier to sit back and see now, but if you went back, do you think you wanted that goal, that right off to the sunset so much that maybe, they were there, but you're brushing them off
Oh,
because you're so focused on that goal?
100%. My ego was so enormous. I was the only woman in a very large drug enforcement unit. I had the biggest deal set for that quarter. And so all I was focused on was making sure that that deal happened. And I was missing things that, the audience, when I share that it's so obvious, but I'm missing these things. And I had specific instructions from my boss. If anything changes, we need to take a step back. We're going to abort and we're going to just do a search warrant. We'll arrest people. But I'm thinking in my mind, search that's boring for me. I don't get to be a part of that. I want the action. So sometimes when we get so wrapped up in what we want or what's going to feed our ego or what we think is going to, take us further, or even the project, we're thinking about other people, we can miss things just because we're so hyper focused on that.
That is wonderful. Yeah, and it happens, I think, to all of us. You want some so bad, maybe you let some slide by, you cut a corner, or you ignore what's obvious there in pursuit of what you want. Carrying on to fast forward a little bit to prosecuting, going on the same theory here. Some of these people you're prosecuting, I'm guessing, are pretty big cases or situations where we definitely wanted to go a certain way. You were explaining how your experience has helped. What's the biggest impact you think it has made in that transition?
So transitioning from police officer to
Yes.
lawyer, I think, for me in particular, a lot of people see trust as values or part of the culture. Really, to me, it's operational, and it was as well, as a prosecutor, because when the pressure's high, and it is in courtrooms, because there's a lot on the line for the accused, guilt, innocence, all of those things, for our communities, for safety. I think when we start using trust as that metric, it really does affect how we do things. So when I transitioned over to the courtroom, the patterns that kept repeating was that communication either stabilizes a scenario or it blows it up. And so the pattern is really simple. And we have these universal things that happen in communications and conversations. And situations can be stabilized when leaders really bring clarity before trying to have control. So as a prosecutor, my job is to get to the truth. It's not to ensure someone goes to jail. It's to make sure that the truth is before the jury or the lawyer. So when we're having all of these volatile interactions with people and things seem to not be so stable and there's a lot on the line, there's chaos, sometimes leaders or people or lawyers or any of us, we rush to over explain, or we let emotion drive our delivery. And the same principles apply in the courtroom, on the streets, in boardrooms. So whether you're in the boardroom or the back room or the courtroom, the same things happen. Only the consequences change, essentially, but the same principles apply.
So, taking that into the business world, I said, you know what, I notice a lot of dysfunction in our meetings. I see a lot of people that will get passionate and emotional, and it turns more into a fight than a constructive argument. What advice would you give me to take back and make some changes?
Well, I think in the undercover world, credibility is never assumed. It's always tested. And the same thing, again, applies to business leaders. And as a prosecutor, I learned that even when we have the strongest facts, when, we have all the things, we've got the charts and everything showing that that's the way it's supposed to be done, when it's delivered without clarity, without really taking everyone's interest into account, it goes off the rails. So when we have this combination of where we can slow things down, and I don't mean we can never slow time down. Sometimes things are happening so fast, but our brain has the ability to parse the information both from what we're seeing in the person, how they're delivering it. We're picking up on all these micro cues that we don't necessarily realize in the moment. And then we're listening to the words that are being spoken. And if we can really get hyper focused on that and be able to decode the messaging, I think we're able to deliver on the results and to deliver trust and make that scenario work for everybody.
That is really, really great advice. That, once again, that applies to everybody. Just business, relationships, friendships. For the TV show, I'd like to know, how did that come about?
They found me on LinkedIn of all places. They were looking, they must have put certain things into the search and they found me and reached out to me. And we did 10 episodes for that series. It's like a docudrama type thing where they play B-roll and have things. And then I'm sitting in an old jail cell area delivering commentary on things. So it was a lot of fun. And then I did a second show called Ancient Justice, and I think that one's going to be coming out later this year. And it's about all the things that happened, in the ancient world around how courtrooms and what the punishments were. It's well, we should feel lucky to be living in the time that we live in right now. Let me just put it that way. So
I believe that. That sounds fascinating. When did you think it will come out later this year?
that's what I've been told. But what I've learned, and no offense to anyone that's in the entertainment industry, but I have to say, to some degree, drug dealers are more reliable than the entertainment industry can be when it comes to deadlines and doing things, and because their hands are tied as well. They're selling it, and then they have to wait and to see if there's another program that's similar to that, and if it's not. And so the things that we watch on television or streaming have been recorded possibly years before, and so trying to make things fit and do all the things. So I've always said, until I see that first episode on television, I don't, even though we filmed everything, it's been edited all, until it's really there, I don't get too excited. But then when it's there, of course I post about it and share.
Well, that's great. Do you want to do more TV? Are you enjoying doing this?
Yeah, it's fun. I had a good time because the people I worked with were so fun and so easygoing, and I found the content really interesting. I could never see myself acting, but I do love commentary and learning about things and being a part of that whole scene. It is so interesting how they put those things together. You see it and it looks so easy, but there's a million things happening behind the scenes.
Well, I am sure you are a natural at it based on just how well you're doing here and how well you are at, how popular you have been with your keynotes. Tell a little bit about that. How did that go? Because, I mean, we're talking some really polar opposite things here, to go from some of the jobs you had jumping out of cars and tracking down drug dealers to inspiring audiences.
Yeah, it happened again pretty organically. It wasn't something I didn't even know that speaking. I thought Tony Robbins and Simon Sinek, where that was pretty much it. Those were the people that were speakers that I didn't recognize, because working for the government all of those years, they didn't bring in big keynote speakers. We just had other cops and lawyers come and talk to us. So I didn't even realize companies were hiring people to come in and do these types of things. But I was speaking to friends, how you're at a cocktail party, what do you do, and all the things. And I was talking about how, leaders or people that are in charge of things don't need more scripts. They need more awareness. They need to be, they need to be able to see signals better and be able to intervene earlier and reduce all the risks. And so sharing some of the stories in that theme, they said, you should really come and speak to the company I'm working with. And I thought, well, how can I'm a government employee. I don't know how that would work. And they said, oh, just, how much do you charge? And I remember saying that to my husband afterward. He's like, hold the phone. You can actually get paid to do these kinds of things. So we started looking into it a little bit more. And he said, if you're going to be serious about it, hire a coach. So I hired a business coach that specializes in speakers, and she gave me some great advice. I followed it because I'm incredibly coachable. I don't want to recreate the wheel. And we really we were very fortunate, and I got hired pretty quickly. And every year, year over year, the speaking business has grown, and I've got to be in front of lots of incredible audiences, everything from dry cleaners to former FBI, military, all the things, bankers, and every audience is different. And I learn a lot from them because they always come up and talk to me afterward. So I got a lot of great intel from attending events.
Is there an event that you can think of that either it was the crowd, it was engagement after something that just hit you like, wow, this one was good, or a place you got to travel to that you're like, this is amazing because of it?
Oh, well, so many, but some that stick out in my mind are so unusual. I spoke to a funeral organization, and there were caskets in the back of the conference center, which was, I'm staring, the audience is there, the caskets are there. So it stood out in my mind. But of course, I've been able to speak at places, one at Carmel, California, this beautiful private golf course overlooking the Pacific Ocean. I can't believe people paid attention to me because the scenery was so amazing. But I've also spoken at small, in the middle of Mississippi, a Holiday Inn conference center, all sorts of variety. And each one I like for different reasons because it's like you're part of a different world every time. I love speaking to salespeople. I find that extroverted energy is so really incredible. I don't get an opportunity to speak to many women's events, which I would love to do more of as well, because again, I come from a very male dominated background, and I've spoken to at conferences in banking and engineering that it's very male dominated. Women are there and they're looking for someone who speaks the same language as they do, essentially. But I like them all for different reasons.
Oh, I would argue that I think that would make you a better speaker for some of those. It's to go do something, to do work, or to go down the path that less people are going, and to kind of blaze that path in a lot of ways, I think actually makes it a better talk than somebody
It's
that's in
been
the same
fun.
spot.
I wouldn't trade any of my careers. I would do each of them again. I've been very fortunate, and I'm grateful because the entire reason I became a police officer is because I didn't want to live the same day twice. And all of the careers I've had have guaranteed that that has never happened. So I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah, you definitely don't live the same day twice in any of those. Are there any ones, without giving details, where you wish you could go back and do like a redo on, besides the staplement, more on prosecuting, let's say, where you're like, man, I wish I had a redo out there.
Oh, on a particular case?
Yeah.
I think so. I had one where the accused took the stand, which is so rare. It's like winning the prosecutor's lottery because they never get on the stand. And when they do, there's a whole different set of rules and how you can ask questions and the information you can get. And it was a very serious case because I was trying the drug part of it, but I also, in the jurisdiction I was in, I was also given the sex assault part of that case as well because there was some connections, and as opposed to having two prosecutors, our office got the entire case. And if I could go back and do that one again, it was successful. He was found guilty by a jury of his peers. But I think that the questions that I asked, I think we could have got there faster when I look back on that. So we got there, but it took a little bit of extra time. So if I could redo that one, I know which questions I would tighten up a little bit and which ones weren't necessary.
I think I appreciate the vulnerability. I really like when people share, people are going to look at this or may listen to this and go, wow, I mean, she's done this and she's done that and she's done this, and it's not very relatable maybe to myself. And so hearing like, yeah, each one of these different career choices or experiences there, but there's still moments, say, go back and go, I would do this over again or change that.
Absolutely. It happens in every career: speaking, parenting, being a volunteer in the community, all the things. It being so great. And I think we get better if we have a little rule in our family. Our son is 21 now, and we've said, you know what, you can be upset, disappointed, angry about things, but you have to set a time limit on that. So it's either 5 minutes, 5 hours, whatever it's going to be. And then as soon as that's over, it is done. You don't ruminate on it. You cannot change it. You're either winning or you're learning. And if you're learning, learn the lesson and move on. And we call it being the penguin because we used to watch that movie Madagascar when he was little. And I don't know if you remember those three penguins, but they had this phrase that it was smile and wave, boys, smile and wave. So when you've let that go, smile and wave and be the penguin.
I love that. I love that movie and that line. So now, and having a fellow 21-year-old myself, how long have you been giving the timer advice to him?
Oh, since he was small. So when he'd have to go to the naughty chair if there was a timeout, and the naughty chair was equal to the minutes of however. So it was 3 minutes, and then when he got off the naughty chair, it was over. There was no punishment. There was no keep talking about it, keep bringing it up. We never brought it up again. It was just over with. So it's fun because right now he is a professional skier and a university student as well. We're super proud of him, but he loves doing both because he said if he's got a bad day on the slopes, he turns to school, saying bad scenario, bad grade, turns to skiing, and gives himself that timeline. And sometimes he'll just text us an emoji of a penguin, and so we know, okay, that's where he's at. And I think it's been great. He loves it, and we've learned a lot from him. My husband and I think, how did it take us like almost 5 decades to figure that lesson out? And our kid has known it since he was 3. So it's been valuable.
That is fantastic advice. That's what I was asking. I was kind of curious how long and how well it sunk in. So
Yeah.
I feel you can give that advice. I like the time limit, especially because have you seen Ted Lasso?
Oh, love Ted Lasso. Absolutely.
So I think the goldfish, right, situation is used a lot. And I love that line to say the least. But the reality of it disappearing in 5 seconds, depending on what the issue is, it's probably not realistic, right? We're a little more complex than the goldfish. So I like the idea of set the timer, though. You can give yourself a little more time, but eventually you got to move on. So
Gotta move on. And then you create space for great things to come in. When you're always focused on that mistake you made or something negative, if you cut it off and now you've allowed your brain, because you've made that transition, because our brains we can control them. They don't have to our subconscious doesn't always have to take the wheel. We can actually take it back. And when we have that physical separation, when the timer goes off or our watch vibrates or whatever it is how we're setting that timeline, I have found that's when the next great client calls, or an earlier flight opens up, or all of those things just start happening because I'm making space for that. I've never been what you would call a woo woo kind of person, all of that sort of thing. I'm a former undercover cop. I'm pretty cynical in a lot of ways, but I do recognize that when we take control of that as best we can, it really opens things up for us.
yeah, you're giving yourself space to focus your mind. And we only get so much time, but focusing that time and your mind on the right items. And I think for a lot of people, and just as guilty of this, you end up consuming your mind and your time worrying about things or dwelling on things that really aren't helping you at all.
Totally.
I love that psychology side of it. Are there other aspects because of what you've done? Like you said, the psychology piece of this is kind of fascinating. What is there one piece that you've learned more on that psychology side that you've really seen equate well to the business side that
Oh,
you'd get for
for sure.
advice?
Absolutely. So, I talk about slowing the moment instead of escalating things. So, when we can recognize that we have emotional control over how we feel about things, how we interpret things, it gives us a lot more clarity and presence that we can shape things a little bit differently. When myself or leaders or parents or people in whatever aspect of business, when they are aware that they can communicate better and then they make clearer decisions because now their message is landing. Because what happens when we're not clear or we're not transparent or we leave big chunks out? People fill in that information. Do they fill it in with things that are positive or that give us the benefit of the doubt? Absolutely not. Our brains just don't work that way. So now we're filling in the negative, and that just now we're spiraling in a way. It's like when people get emails. Have you ever received an email and you thought, did I do something to upset them? What's wrong? Or a text or like, I didn't see this coming. But in reality, that's not what they meant. It's just the clarity was missing and the tone was left out. So that happens in person with our voice, with our presence, our body language, but it also happens on our online communication when we don't have that clarity and we don't have that confidence that we put into the messaging. Oftentimes it's going to be misinterpreted and not in our favor and not in a way that's helpful to the person that we're communicating with. So when we can elevate that, we're going to increase trust because trust really exists at the crossroads of strength and warmth. If we have too much of one in our messaging and not enough of the other, it's not going to land necessarily the way we had intended. But when we can really merge those two things and how we show up, how we communicate, it's a game changer all the way around.
Oh, that is fantastic advice. Yeah, I don't think there's communication is probably underlooked when looking at like strategy or how do we improve the business. But communication is tied to price, some of the most important aspects. And I feel like even the scenario you said, email, I'm like, you might as well have a video camera into, the company I work with because it's, we'll have employees come up and, yeah, I just don't think I've got a good relationship with this other leader, or I don't think they like me. And go, why do you think that? And they go through it, and like you said, sometimes you just fill your head with your own thoughts. They're not reality or maybe the truth. It's just what we fill them with. Well, have you actually just talked to the person about it? And if they do that, and when they do that, almost every single time, it's the same outcome. Yeah, I just read into it wrong. I
Yeah,
mean, I
and
rarely had it come back and be like, yeah, they definitely don't like me. It's always been, we just weren't, interpreting things, seeing things differently, communicating and not understanding where the other one.
in our hybrid world and with people who have not necessarily been working together where they can pick up on the nuances and have the small talk that really elevates relationships. I was hired by one of the largest tech companies in the world to come in and teach their people how to talk to each other again because they'd been working remotely for so long. And I won't mention their name because it would be shocking. And I was shocked, but the more I looked at it after I got over that first couple of minutes, like, really, this is a thing. I see it everywhere now, especially people that are just coming back into workspace or doing there more often, or they're really taking a proactive approach with just hybrid or only remote work. It is Human beings are complicated. I know AI is taking over the world. I get all of that. I get the memos on that. But people still have to be able to communicate with other human beings. And when we get it wrong, it costs a lot of time and a lot of money. So the things that I like to talk about cost $0 and zero extra time to implement, but the return on investment is enormous. We see a shift in how people can relate to one another. And when the message is delivered clearly and succinctly and in a way that I can interpret as the person receiving it, game changer. All this misinformation, disinformation, all the things, when we can turn that around, it's imagine if people around the planet could talk to each other in a way that they were just having conversations. Again, I'm getting into the woo-woo space. It's not mine, but I think it would change. Things change once you start talking and really communicating.
Agreed. I think I'll put it out there. I think society would learn a lot if we all did a better job of listening and communicating and doing it with the intent of wanting to do it with the other person as well. Um, it, I feel bad. My wife's gonna listen to this and she's gonna get really mad I said this, but like that, your advice, that's work advice. That's everyday human advice. That's not, hey, we went into COVID. I've been with my wife for a very long time. And I would say, so from like somebody that knows me, probably the closest of anyone. And there will be times where we're pretty comfortable with each other, but we'll say something, or maybe I'll make a comment. She doesn't say anything. I can tell it's probably not, something's off. And then I'll get like the text message the next day. And this is what I'm feeling. I'm like, where was that yesterday? Or like in the moment? Or why didn't you just tell me?
Well, Chris, that's
We'll
called
open it up.
marriage. I hate to break it to you, but that's called marriage. So, usually the people that are closest to us are the ones that we lack some communication skills with often because we think they know us so well. They finish our sentences that we don't really need to explain ourselves, or that they know where we're going, or they understand we've had this kind of day. And I think that happens across relationships. So there's no worries there. I would hate to have my husband Kevin on here with me because I'm sure he would say, "Oh, sometimes she misses these things at home." So it's just part of being a human being.
Absolutely. Well, and I always tell her, I'm like, I'm just glad you shared it. Not knowing,
Yes.
or like the lack of communication is way worse, and it's not healthy. But that's an example where we have two people who love each other, right? And we still will have a lack of communication. So now you go into a workplace, and I think it just kind of amplifies the fact of that's going to happen even more. Somebody just doesn't want to communicate, they don't want to have that hard conversation. So they just keep it to themselves. And that's never good for the business.
It isn't, because again, that's the lack of transparency that's happening. And so if we don't know what's broken, we're not able to fix it. But we need to create a culture within the organization or within whichever relationship that says it's okay if you don't like this. I'd like to know about that. But there are ways to deliver it. And I just want to put out there that sandwich protocol that people talk about, deliver the good and then the bad and then the good. Everybody's onto that. It doesn't work. And people feel betrayed and they don't like it. So please stop using that. If there was one tip I could give that's really easy to digest and everybody can do it, the next time you're in a conversation with someone, either on the phone, in person, not necessarily written because that's a different protocol, whether it's personal or business, if you start listening to your own voice and start really paying attention to the moment when you're speaking. We always talk about being a great listener, but listen to the tone of your voice. If it starts to elevate, if your voice starts to get higher and faster, or you seem more frantic, that should be a cue to you that it's time to take a step back, take a breath, regroup. Because if you can hear it, it's 10xing across the room from you. So whenever I was in a scenario, I learned this working undercover from a very experienced officer. Listen to how you're speaking. Take a moment. Don't speak over top. Take a breath. And you'll be able to know, and you'll be able to calm down your own sympathetic nervous system, because when you are in life or death scenarios and situations that are incredibly high risk, how you sound and the way you are speaking is going to be very, very important. And so I encourage people, try that one thing. Just if you're in a high tense situation or you are feeling misunderstood, so often we just want to get the next statement in. We're listening to the person with the intent of cross-examining them somehow, or asking a question that'll steer them over here. Instead, listen to your own voice and the cadence and the tone of your voice, and that will tell you everything about where you are in that moment. Heightens your self-awareness, and then you can start to regroup and take control again.
That is wonderful advice. Yeah, the tone is extremely important in how it comes across, and it kind of plays, it sounds silly, but say the golden rule that, the way you're talking to somebody, you should be doing it the same way you want them to talk right back to you. But yeah, it actually never hurts the idea of sitting back and listening to the way you're talking or the tone and focusing on it instead of just putting it out there. And it makes perfect sense now that you say it. Do kind of want to wrap this up, but because you said that, it just had my brain kind of wrapping it around this tone and the idea um and listening to yourself and concentrating. Was there ever a time where you were so nervous, whether speaking or, in a high stakes moment, and you had that, you're trying to listen to yourself, but you're scared, you're nervous, you can feel yourself, perhaps shaking, the heart racing. What do you do in those situations?
It didn't happen as often working undercover as you might think. Probably because I was younger, and I think sometimes when we're younger, we don't see consequences the same way we do later in life. But one that comes to mind was the first TEDx talk I did, and it was before I started professionally speaking. And I was very excited to have this opportunity. And, like every new speaker or people that are thinking about doing that, you think that a TEDx talk is going to somehow blow up your speaking career. And for some, maybe, but for the 98%, not so much. And I had my talk nailed. I knew it. I could start it in the middle, I could start at the end. I was ready. I was so excited. I get there and the talk is happening and it's being live streamed on the Saturday, and the Friday night we're going to do our rehearsal. So I drive over to the rehearsal feeling pretty good, and I get there, and as soon as I hit that red round carpet, I could not remember the first sentence of my talk. And I'm standing there, the lights are on, there, the director and the people, the organizers are there, and the only people in the audience are other speakers that were going to be speaking that day. They kept saying, "It's okay, it's okay," and the more people said, "It's okay, it's okay," the worse it became, and I couldn't remember. So I left there Friday night, and I called my husband on the way, and he said, "How'd it go?" And I just let loose. I had the penguin moment. I gave myself a little bit longer, I think, than I had anticipated. And I got back to the hotel, and I couldn't sleep. I started Googling all the ways to remember things, and the next day I get there, and one of the other speakers came up to me and said, "Are you okay? Don't worry, it'll be fine. I'm sure you'll be okay." And then that drove me to be like, "Oh, I've got this. Don't you worry about it. Watch." And I went out and I wouldn't say it's my best work by any stretch. So if anyone watches that first TEDx talk, give me a little bit of grace, but I did get it out. And, we went, because memorizing 17 and a half minutes with no slides, no props, nothing, it was harder than I thought. So, but I learned a lot from that moment as well. Again, sometimes overconfidence, sometimes putting the pressure on, all of the things. I wasn't following my own advice. Fortunately, the next day worked out to be okay, but not as great as I had.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Once again, it's just that relatability of, from the outside, everything's going to look really polished and amazing. And a lot of times people don't get to see the work that goes into it or the moments leading up to it and what's going through somebody's head. Either way, I have seen the video. It is very good. And I'm not the only one that's seen it. There's quite a few views on there as well. What I won't do, I'll make people go look for it. But
Okay.
one of the things I am going to do is in the notes, if you guys go to the details of this and you're listening, there'll be a link to Pamela's website so you can look her up, as well as her social media as well. So with that, I just really want to tell you thanks for joining us today for this episode.
Well, thank you, Chris. Felt like talking to an old friend, so I'm glad that we had this chance, and I look forward to a lot more conversations and really building on the relationship with you and all of your amazing clients.
I appreciate that, to say the least. I'm looking forward to you getting on a lot more stages if they can find time in your calendar because you're already
Thank you.
busy how it is. So thank you, Pamela.
Thanks, Chris.